When two guards humiliated an elderly veteran at his grandson's graduation, they didn't expect a nurse to fight back. What happened next, when 10 SEALs stepped in, left the entire town speechless. I've always believed a man's worth isn't in the medals he wears or the stories he tells, but in the promises he keeps. That's why I was there, sitting in the third row of the Crestview Community Center's auditorium, my old hands folded over the polished oak of my cane, waiting for my grandson Derek to walk across that stage. Crestview, Nebraska isn't much, a speck of a town where the alfalfa fields stretch wider than ambition, but it's home, and this day was bigger than any I'd seen in years. Derek, my boy, was graduating high school, first in our family to do it with honors. I'd raised him since he was 6, after his mama, my sweet Clara, passed from cancer. Every late-night math lesson, every scraped knee I bandaged, every track meet I drove him to in my rattling Ford pickup, it all led to this moment. I wasn't about to miss it. The auditorium smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers, the kind folks bring to graduations to make the air feel hopeful. The late June sun slanted through high windows, painting golden streaks across the rows of folding chairs packed with families. Parents fussed with cameras, kids squirmed in their caps and gowns up on stage, and the hum of anticipation buzzed like cicadas outside. I'd gotten there early, hobbling in at 4 o'clock despite the ache in my knees, to claim a seat close enough to see Derek's shy smile. My navy blazer, worn thin at the elbows, felt heavy with the weight of a small gift in the pocket. A pocket watch engraved with Derek's initials. I'd saved for it over months, skipping my morning coffee at Millie's diner, counting pennies like a kid again. It was worth it. That watch was my way of saying, "You did it, son. Keep going." I was lost in that thought, picturing Derek's face when I'd hand it over, when a sharp tap on my shoulder yanked me back. "Sir, you need to move," said a voice, gruff and impatient, like I was a stray dog in his yard. I turned, squinting up at a security guard, a broad-shouldered fella in his 30s with a badge that read Travis Benton. His eyes were narrowed, his mouth a thin line, like dealing with me was the worst part of his day. "This row's reserved for VIPs. School board's coming?" I blinked, caught off balance. My heart gave a little lurch, not from fear, but from the sting of being dismissed so quick. "I'm sorry, son," I said, keeping my voice steady, "but I've been here since 4. This is my grandson's graduation. I'd like to stay put." I leaned on my cane, feeling the familiar ache in my legs, the scars from Vietnam tugging under my slacks. I wasn't looking for a fight, just a seat to watch my boy shine. Travis snorted, a sound that grated like gravel under boots. "Doesn't matter," he said, adjusting his utility belt like it gave him authority over the world. "Rules are rules. Move to the back or get out." His tone carried a sneer, like I was some old fool clogging up his schedule. A few heads turned. Folks in the rows nearby, clutching their programs, their eyes flicking between curiosity and unease. I felt their stares like pinpricks, but I kept my chin up. I'd faced worse than a loudmouth guard. Jungle ambushes, mortar fire, the screams of men I couldn't save. They teach you to hold your ground. "I'm not causing trouble," I said, my voice low but firm, the way I used to talk to green recruits who thought they knew it all. "I just want to see my boy walk that stage. That's all." Travis leaned in, close enough I could smell the mint gum on his breath. "Look, old man," he said, his voice dropping to a mocking drawl, "you're holding up the show. Move now or I'll walk you out myself." His hand hovered near the radio clipped to his belt, a threat wrapped in plastic. The auditorium grew quieter, the principal's opening remarks fading as more folks turned to watch. A woman behind me, Marla Kincaid, muttered to her husband, "That's not right. He's just sitting there." But nobody spoke up, not yet. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, not from shame, but from the sheer gall of it. Here I was, trying to do right by Derek. And this kid, barely older than my grandson, was treating me like I didn't belong. I tightened my grip on my cane, the wood smooth under my calluses. "I served this country, son," I said, meeting his eyes. "Got the scars to prove it. I've earned my place here, same as anyone." I wasn't bragging. Lord knows I don't talk about Vietnam much, but I figured a man like Travis might think twice if he knew what I'd been through. He didn't. He rolled his eyes, a smirk tugging at his lips. Yeah, sure, Grandpa. Everyone's a hero these days. Now get up. He gestured to the back of the room, where a few empty seats sat by the exit, far from the stage. I pictured Derek looking for me, his eyes scanning the crowd, and my chest tightened. Moving back there felt like letting him down, like admitting I was less than the man who raised him. Well, I said, a touch of dry humor creeping in despite myself, if I'm a hero, I reckon I've earned a better seat than the nosebleeds. I meant it light, hoping to ease the tension, but Travis's face hardened. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he snapped, and before I could answer, he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm enough to make my shoulder twinge. My cane slipped, clattering to the floor with a sound that cut through the room like a gunshot. Gasps rippled from the crowd. Marla Kincaid stood, her voice sharp as a whip. Hey, leave him alone! He's not hurting anybody! I bent to pick up my cane, slow and deliberate, ignoring the pain shooting through my knees. Every eye was on me now, and I felt it, the weight of their pity, their curiosity, their silence. Up on stage, I caught Derek's gaze, his face pale with worry. I forced a small smile, not wanting him to see me rattled. This wasn't his burden to carry. Travis wasn't done. Another guard, a skinny kid named Corey Dunlap, showed up, his face nervous, but his stance backing Travis. Sir, Corey said, his voice softer but no less final. We're not asking again. Out! Now! I straightened, leaning on my cane, and looked between them. Two young bucks, puffed up with power they hadn't earned. I could have told them about the silver star pinned in my dresser drawer, about the nights I still woke up smelling jungle rot. But what good would it do? Men like Travis don't hear stories. They hear excuses. I'll move if I have to, I said, my voice calm as a still pond. But I'd appreciate a little respect. Life's too short for this nonsense. Travis laughed, a short, ugly bark. Save the wisdom, old man. Door's that way. He stepped closer, crowding me, and I felt the old fire stir in my gut, the kind that kept me alive in '68 when the world was chaos and all I had was my grit. Before things could escalate, a voice cut through. Mr. Hadley? It was Tessa Rowland, a nurse I'd known for years, her scrubs wrinkled from a double shift at Crestview General. She'd slipped through the side door, her face flushed, her dark hair spilling from a bun. Tessa had patched up Derek's scrapes back in middle school, always with a kind word and a lollipop. She'd promised to be here for him, and seeing me in this mess, her eyes blazed. What's going on here? I shook my head, not wanting her dragged into it. Just a misunderstanding, Tessa. I'll handle it. But Tessa wasn't one to back down. She stepped between me and the guards, her hands on her hips. Why are you making him leave? This is his grandson's graduation, for heaven's sake! Travis crossed his arms, unfazed. Lady, this doesn't concern you. He's in a reserved section. He was told to move and didn't. Tessa's voice rose, sharp enough to turn heads. Reserved? For who? Some school board hotshot who's not even here? This man raised that boy up there. He deserves to be here more than anybody. Her words hung in the air, and I saw a few folks nod, their murmurs growing. Marla Kincaid had her phone out now, recording, her lips pressed tight. Corey shifted, looking uneasy, but Travis held his ground. Rules are rules. You want to argue, take it up with the principal. Now move, both of you. I put a hand on Tessa's shoulder, gentle but firm. It's all right, Tessa. I don't want trouble. But inside, I was boiling. Not for myself, but for Derek, for the way this was tainting his day. I turned to Travis, my voice low. You boys might want to think twice about how you treat folks. Life's got a way of coming back around. Travis smirked, muttering, should have listened the first time. It took everything in me not to say more. But I'd learned long ago that words don't teach men like him. Actions do. I started toward the aisle, my cane tapping slow and steady, Tessa at my side, her eyes still flashing. The crowd parted, some looking away, others whispering. I felt every step, the pocket watch in my blazer a heavy reminder of why I'd come. I wasn't here for me. I was here for Derek. But as we reached the exit, the auditorium doors swinging shut behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Outside, the Nebraska air was warm, thick with the scent of alfalfa and distant barbecue. Tessa was fuming, pacing the gravel lot. "This is wrong, Mr. Hadley. I'm going back in and talking to Dr. Vaughn. They can't treat you like this." I eased onto a bench, my knees grateful for the rest. "Let it be, Tessa. I'll find another way to see Derek. He's what matters." But Tessa's eyes were fierce. "No, you don't deserve this. I'm not letting it go." She pulled out her phone, already dialing, as the faint sound of applause drifted from inside. Derek's name had just been called. I closed my eyes, picturing him crossing the stage, his diploma in hand. I'd wanted to be there, to clap louder than anyone. Instead, I was out here, cast aside like yesterday's news. I leaned back, my cane across my lap, and let out a wry chuckle. "You know, Tessa," I said, "I've faced down worse than a couple of overzealous guards. But I'll be damned if it doesn't sting to be invisible in your own town." My voice was light, but the truth in it was heavy. I'd fought for this country, raised a good boy, paid my dues, and yet, here I was, on the outside, looking in. The gravel of the Crestview Community Center's parking lot crunched under my boots as I stood there, my cane planted like a flag in enemy territory. The Nebraska evening wrapped around me, warm and heavy, the air thick with the sweet tang of alfalfa fields and the distant sizzle of a barbecue someone had fired up for the graduates. Inside, the auditorium echoed with cheers, each one a reminder that my grandson Derek was living his moment, crossing that stage, diploma in hand, while I was out here, cast out like a worn-out tool. My chest ached, not from the old shrapnel scars, but from the sting of being invisible in a town I'd called home for decades. Tessa Rowland, the nurse who'd known Derek since his playground days, paced nearby, her scrubs creased from a long shift at Crestview General. Her dark hair was slipping from its bun, and her eyes burned with a righteous fury I hadn't seen since she chewed out a bully for picking on Derek in 6th grade. "This is beyond ridiculous, Mr. Hadley," she said, her voice tight as a coiled spring. "I'm calling Dr. Vaughn again. She needs to fix this now." Her fingers flew over her phone, dialing with a determination that made me almost smile. Almost. "Tessa," I said, my voice low, "don't stir up a hornet's nest. I don't want Derek's day tarnished by this mess." I eased myself onto a bench, the wood creaking under my weight, and leaned my cane against my knee. The pocket watch in my blazer pocket felt heavier than ever, its engraved initials, DH, a silent promise I wasn't sure I could keep tonight. "Tarnished?" Tessa stopped pacing, her hands on her hips, her eyes flashing like a storm over the plains. "Mr. Hadley, you're the one who got him here. You worked double shifts at the grain mill, drove him to every track practice in that beat-up truck of yours, and now they're treating you like you don't matter. No, sir, I'm not standing for it." Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the kind of anger that comes when you see someone you respect get stepped on. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Tessa was a good woman, fierce as a mother bear, but I'd learned long ago that some fights cost more than they win. Still, Travis Benton's words, "Old man, everyone's a hero," gnawed at me like a splinter under a nail. I'd faced down Viet Cong snipers, carried bleeding men through jungle mud, but this quiet, petty dismissal in front of my neighbors, it cut deeper than I cared to admit. "Well," I said, a wry chuckle escaping, "if I'd known my front row seat came with a side of humiliation, I'd have brought popcorn." Tessa didn't laugh. She was too busy glaring at her phone, waiting for Dr. Vaughn to pick up. Inside, the ceremony rolled on, the muffled voice of the principal drifting through the closed doors. I pictured Derek up there, his cap probably sliding off that mop of hair he never could tame, looking for me in the crowd. My throat tightened. I'd promised him I'd be there, clapping louder than anyone. Instead, I was out here, my pride bruised and my heart heavy. The parking lot wasn't empty, though. Pickup trucks and minivans gleamed under the sodium streetlights, and a few latecomers hurried toward the entrance, clutching bouquets and balloons. I caught snippets of their chatter. "Did you see that video? Poor old guy." And realized the scene inside had spread faster than a prairie fire. Marla Kincaid, the woman who'd stood up for me, had posted her recording to the Crestview community group online. I didn't have one of those fancy phones. But I knew enough to guess it wasn't good for Travis and his sidekick Corey. Tessa finally got through to Dr. Vaughn. "Eleanor, it's Tessa Rowland," she said, her voice sharp but professional. "They kicked Mr. Hadley out of the ceremony. Travis Benton and Corey Dunlap told him his seat was for VIPs and practically dragged him out. He didn't do a thing wrong." She paused, listening, her jaw tightening. "You're in the middle of the ceremony? Well, this is an emergency. You need to make this right." I watched her, grateful, but uneasy. Tessa was fighting for me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than a misunderstanding. It was the way Travis had smirked, the way Corey had followed orders without a second thought. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about folks thinking an old man like me didn't count anymore. I'd seen it before, in the way clerks at the hardware store talked past me, or how kids on Juniper Hollow Road sped by my house like I was a ghost. But here, at Derek's graduation, that was a new kind of low. Tessa hung up, her face a mix of hope and frustration. "Dr. Vaughn says she'll handle it after the ceremony. She sounded sorry, but that's not good enough." She turned to me, her eyes fierce. "Mr. Hadley, we're going back in. You belong there, not out here." I shook my head, my voice soft but firm. "I'm not looking to make a scene, Tessa. Derek's moment is what matters. I'll wait here. Catch him when he comes out." I meant it, but the words tasted bitter. I thought of the silver star tucked in my dresser, the nights I'd spent teaching Derek to tie a knot or change a tire, the way he'd looked at me like I was his hero. Sitting out here felt like betraying that. Tessa wasn't having it. "A scene? They're the ones who made a scene, humiliating you in front of half the town." She marched toward the entrance, her sneakers kicking up gravel, but before she reached the doors, Corey stepped out, his skinny frame blocking the way. His face was nervous, his eyes darting like a deer in headlights. "Ma'am," he said, holding up a hand, "you can't go back in unless you're on the guest list." "I was already inside," Tessa snapped, her voice carrying across the lot. "And you know it. Let us back in, or I'm calling Sheriff Pritchard." Corey flinched, his hand hovering near his radio. "Look, I'm just following orders. Travis said—" "Travis isn't the mayor of Crestview," Tessa cut in, her words sharp as a blade. "You're humiliating a man who served this country. You think that's okay?" Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the kind of righteous anger that makes folks rethink their choices. I stood, my cane tapping the ground, and hobbled over. "Tessa, ease up," I said, though I admired her grit. I looked at Corey, his young face flushed with uncertainty. "Son," I said, "you're just doing your job, I get it. But sometimes you gotta ask yourself if the job's worth doing this way. You ever think about that?" Corey's eyes flicked to the ground, but before he could answer, Travis appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed, his smirk back in place. "What's the problem now?" he said, his voice dripping with irritation. "I told you both to leave. You're making a scene, and it's embarrassing." "Embarrassing?" I said, a dry laugh escaping. "Son, you're the one turning a graduation into a circus. I just wanted to watch my boy graduate. But you've got a knack for making simple things complicated." My voice was calm, but inside, I was simmering. I'd faced men with guns who showed more respect than this kid. Travis stepped closer, crowding me. "Big talk for someone who can barely walk," he said, his voice low and mocking. "Go home, old man, before you embarrass yourself more." The words hit like a slap. I felt Tessa tense beside me, her breath catching. I kept my eyes on Travis, my grip on my cane steady. "You're young," I said, my voice soft but laced with steel. You'll learn one day that respect ain't something you demand, it's something you give, and you're running real low on it." Travis's lip curled, but before he could fire back, a new voice cut through the dusk. "What the hell is going on out here?" Sheriff Dwayne Pritchard strode across the lot, his stocky frame casting a long shadow. His badge glinted under the streetlights, and his eyes were hard as flint. Someone in the community group had tagged him in Marla's video, and he'd come straight from the station. He looked from me to Tessa to the guards, his jaw tight. Tessa didn't miss a beat. "Sheriff, these two kicked Mr. Hadley out of his grandson's graduation for no reason. He was just sitting there, minding his own business." Dwayne's gaze locked on Travis, who shifted, his smirk faltering. "That true, Benton? You removed a veteran from the ceremony?" Travis shrugged, trying to play it cool. "He was in a reserved section. I was doing my job." "My job," I muttered, shaking my head. Funny how folks hide behind that excuse when they're stepping on someone's dignity. I didn't mean for him to hear, but Dwayne caught it, his eyes narrowing. "Your job," Dwayne said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think your job is to humiliate a man who's done more for this country than you'll ever dream of." He turned to Corey, who looked like he wanted to sink into the gravel. "And you, Dunlap, you just went along with it?" Corey raised his hands, stammering. "Sheriff, we didn't know he was a veteran. We were just—" "Save it," Dwayne snapped. He turned to me, his tone softening. "Mr. Hadley, I'm sorry about this. Come with me. We're getting you back inside." I shook my head, my voice quiet. "I appreciate it, Dwayne. But I don't want to disrupt things. I'll wait for Derek out here." I meant it, but the words felt hollow. I could hear the applause inside, louder now, signaling the ceremony's end. Derek would be looking for me, wondering why I wasn't there. Dwayne's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right, but this ain't over." He shot a glare at Travis and Corey, who exchanged uneasy glances. "You two stay put, we're having a talk." As Dwayne escorted Tessa back inside to find Dr. Vaughn, I sank onto the bench again, the pocket watch a cold weight in my pocket. The cheers from the auditorium swelled, and I closed my eyes, picturing Derek's grin, his cap askew. I'd wanted to be there, to see him shine. Instead, I was out here, my heart heavy with the realization that this wasn't just a mix-up. It was a symptom of something bigger. Folks forgetting what matters, dismissing men like me because our hair's gray and our steps are slow. I let out a wry chuckle, talking to nobody but the night air. "Well, Vernon," I said, "you've survived worse than a couple of rent-a-cops with big egos. But damn if it doesn't make you wonder what this world's coming to." The humor was thin, but it kept me steady, like a rope in a storm. Then, the crunch of tires on gravel pulled me back. A black SUV rolled into the lot, its headlights cutting through the dusk. The doors opened and 3 men stepped out, their military uniforms crisp, their postures straight as iron. The oldest, a man with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons, scanned the lot until his eyes found me. He approached, his boots clicking with purpose, and I felt a prickle of something I hadn't felt in years. Recognition. "Vernon Hadley," he said, his voice steady but warm, like a campfire on a cold night. I stood, leaning on my cane, my brow furrowed. "That's me." He extended a hand, his grip firm. "Colonel Marcus Treadwell, U.S. Navy SEALs, retired. I got a call from an old friend who said you might need some backup." I blinked, my mind racing. I hadn't called anyone, hadn't spoken of this to a soul. But before I could ask, the auditorium doors flew open and a crowd spilled out, Derek among them, his cap clutched in his hand. His eyes found me, and he broke into a run, his voice thick with emotion. "Grandpa, what happened? Why aren't you inside?" I forced a smile, my hand on his shoulder. "Just a little mix-up, son. I'm here now." But as I looked at Treadwell, standing there like a sentinel, I knew this was no mix-up. Something was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The parking lot of the Crestview Community Center was alive with the chaos of celebration, a swirl of graduates in their black gowns, parents snapping photos, and the smoky scent of hot dogs grilling on a food truck nearby. The Nebraska evening had settled in, the sky a deep indigo pricked with early stars, but I felt like I was standing in a spotlight, my cane grounded in the gravel, my grandson Derek at my side. His eyes were wide, his graduation cap clutched tight, his voice low and trembling with a mix of confusion and anger. "Grandpa, why didn't you tell me they kicked you out? I would have done something, said something." I rested a hand on his shoulder, feeling the lean strength of the boy I'd raised into a man. "This is your day, Derek," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I didn't want to steal a single second of it. But the truth was heavier than my words. Being cast out of that auditorium, dismissed like I was nothing, had left a bruise on my soul deeper than any I'd carried from Vietnam. I'd faced death in the jungle, buried friends, and raised a boy alone. But standing here, knowing I'd missed Derek's moment because of a couple of overzealous guards, it stung like salt in a wound. Tessa Rowland stood nearby, her nurse's scrubs catching the glow of the streetlights, her phone buzzing with notifications from the Crestview community group where Marla Kincaid's video of my humiliation was spreading like wildfire. Tessa's face was a storm of indignation, but her eyes softened when they met mine. "Mr. Hadley," she said, her voice fierce but kind, "this isn't over. Not by a long shot." I managed a wry smile, leaning on my cane. "Tessa, you've got more fight in you than half the recruits I trained back in '68, but I'm all right. Long as Derek's got that diploma, I'm all right." It was half true. The pocket watch in my blazer pocket, engraved with Derek's initials, felt like a promise I hadn't yet kept, and that gnawed at me. But the lot was no longer just a backdrop for graduates and their families. 3 men in crisp military uniforms stood a few paces away, their presence like a quiet thunderhead on the horizon. The oldest, Colonel Marcus Treadwell, a retired Navy SEAL with silver hair and a chest heavy with ribbons, watched me with a knowing look that stirred memories I hadn't touched in years. His 2 companions, younger but no less imposing, stood at ease, their eyes scanning the growing crowd. I hadn't called them, hadn't whispered a word of this mess to anyone. Yet here they were, like ghosts from a life I'd left behind. The crowd, near 100 now, parents, kids, and teachers spilling out from the auditorium, formed a loose semicircle around us, their murmurs rising like the hum of cicadas. I felt their eyes, not pitying now, but curious, sensing something bigger was unfolding. Marla Kincaid, her phone still in hand, whispered to her husband, Leonard, "This is gonna be one for the books." I caught snippets of other voices. "That's Vernon Hadley. Did you see the video?" And realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. Crestview was watching. Sheriff Dwayne Pritchard emerged from the auditorium, his stocky frame cutting through the crowd, followed by Dr. Eleanor Vaughn, the principal, her face pale but resolute. Behind them trailed Travis Benton and Corey Dunlap, the guards who'd started this mess. Travis's earlier swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his jaw, like a kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. Corey kept his eyes on the ground, his hands stuffed in his pockets, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Dr. Vaughn approached me, her heels clicking on the gravel, her voice measured but heavy with regret. "Mr. Hadley," she said, meeting my eyes, "I am deeply sorry for what happened tonight. This was a failure on our part, a terrible one. You should never have been asked to leave." I nodded, my grip on my cane steady. "I appreciate that, Dr. Vaughn," I said, my voice low but clear. "But this ain't just about me. It's about treating folks right, no matter how old they are or what they look like. That's what I taught Derek, and I reckon it's what this town ought to stand for." My words came slow, deliberate, the way I used to talk to my platoon when the stakes were high. I wasn't angry, not outwardly, but I was done being invisible. Dr. Vaughn's lips pressed tight, and she nodded. "You're right. We'll make this right." She glanced at Travis and Corey, her eyes narrowing, but before she could say more, Colonel Treadwell stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a rifle shot. "Vernon Hadley," he said, loud enough for the whole lot to hear, his tone warm but commanding. I felt every eye snap to him, and my heart gave a lurch, not sure what was coming. "I served with men who spoke your name like it was a prayer," he continued, his gaze locked on mine. "Men who said you carried them out of hell in '68, through a jungle burning with napalm, with bullets tearing the air. You were awarded the Silver Star for that, weren't you?" A gasp rippled through the crowd, soft but sharp, like wind through the alfalfa fields. Derek's head whipped toward me, his mouth open, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and pride. "Grandpa," he whispered, "you never told me." His voice cracked, and I felt a pang, knowing I'd kept that part of my life locked away. Not out of shame, but because some scars don't need showing. I shifted, my cane tapping the gravel, and cleared my throat. "Wasn't something to brag about, son," I said, my voice rough. "I did what needed doing, same as any man would." But the truth was, those nights still haunted me. The screams, the mud, the weight of men I couldn't save. I'd carried 3 soldiers out of that ambush, my leg torn open by shrapnel, and I'd have done it again. But I didn't need a medal to tell me it was right. Treadwell turned to the crowd, his eyes sweeping over Travis and Corey, who shrank under his gaze. "This man," he said, pointing to me, "saved lives under fire, not for glory, but because it was his duty. And tonight, some of you thought it was fine to toss him out like he was nothing." His voice was steady, but it carried a weight that silenced the murmurs. That's the trouble with this world. Too many folks forgetting who built it, who bled for it. Travis shifted, his face red, his voice low. "We didn't know he was a veteran," he muttered, but it sounded weak, like a kid caught in a lie. "You didn't ask," Treadwell snapped, his words sharp as a bayonet. "You saw an old man and figured he didn't matter. That's your failure, son, and you'll carry it longer than you think." The crowd was dead silent now, every eye on me, on Treadwell, on the guards. Tessa stepped closer, her hand brushing my arm, her eyes glistening but fierce. Derek stood tall, his diploma clutched tight, his gaze locked on me like I was the only man in the world. I felt the weight of it all, their trust, their anger, their hope, and it steadied me, like a hand on my shoulder in the dark. Then from the back, a sound broke the silence, a slow, rhythmic clap. It was Marla Kincaid, her hands coming together with purpose, her face set with conviction. Her husband joined in, then Denise Carver, the bakery owner, then a graduate I didn't know, until the lot echoed with applause, a wave of sound that rolled over me like a warm tide. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I hadn't wanted this, hadn't asked for it, but it felt like a debt being paid. Not to me, but to every man I'd served with, every sacrifice we'd made. Dr. Vaughn took a step forward, a handheld microphone now in her hand, her voice amplified across the lot. "Mr. Hadley," she said, her tone firm but warm, "on behalf of Crestview High, I invite you back inside. We'd be honored if you'd join us for the reception, and if you'd share a few words with our graduates." I hesitated, glancing at Derek. His eyes were bright, his voice soft but urgent. "Please, Grandpa, they need to hear you." Tessa nodded, her smile fierce, and even Treadwell gave a slight dip of his chin, like a general passing the torch. "All right," I said, my voice rough but steady. "Let's go, son." With Derek at my side, Tessa behind me, and the 3 SEALs trailing like a quiet honor guard, I walked back toward the auditorium. The crowd parted, their applause swelling, and I felt every step, my cane tapping a rhythm of resolve. Dwayne leaned toward Travis and Corey, his voice a low growl. "You 2 are done here. Expect a call from my office tomorrow." Travis's face paled, and Corey looked like he might bolt, but I didn't spare them a glance. They'd learn their lesson, one way or another. Inside, the auditorium was transformed. Tables laden with punch and cookies, balloons in the school's red and gold bobbing above. The crowd followed us in, their cheers echoing off the rafters. Dr. Vaughn led me to the stage, her hand steady as she passed me the microphone. I took it, my fingers calloused but sure, and looked out at the sea of faces, graduates, parents, teachers, and those 3 seals standing proud at the back. My heart thudded, not from nerves but from the weight of the moment. "I ain't much for speeches," I said, my voice rough but clear, carrying across the room. "I'm just an old man who loves his grandson." I glanced at Derek, front row, his eyes shining. But if I've learned one thing in my years, it's this. Respect ain't something you demand. It's something you give. You give it to the man next to you, to the stranger in the street, to the folks who came before you, and when you do, it comes back tenfold. The room was silent, every word landing like a stone in still water. I paused, my eyes finding Treadwell, his salute sharp and proud. I came here for Derek, to see him take this step. I didn't expect all this, but I'm grateful. To you all, and to the men who reminded me I ain't alone. I nodded at Treadwell, my throat tight. The applause erupted, louder than before, a roar that shook the rafters. Derek rushed the stage, his arms around me, his diploma pressed against my back. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa," he whispered, and I felt my eyes burn, though I'd never admit it. Tessa wiped her cheeks, her smile fierce as ever. Marla's phone was still rolling, capturing a moment that'd outlive us all. As the crowd surged forward, hands outstretched to shake mine, Treadwell approached, his voice low. "You're a hell of a man, Vernon. If you ever need us, you know where to find us." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Marcus. But I reckon I'm all right now." I reached into my pocket, pulling out the pocket watch. Handing it to Derek, I said, "This is for you, son. Keep it close, and keep moving forward." Derek took it, his fingers tracing the engraving, and hugged me again, his cap falling to the floor. The crowd cheered, and for the first time that night, I let myself smile. A small, quiet thing, born of a victory I hadn't sought but wouldn't refuse. I'd come for Derek, and in the end, that was enough.